Hey guys, welcome to the second installment of the Control Corner on Kayfabe TV. Today we're going to be checking out Blue-White Control for Standard. This is a very popular deck. There's a couple of different ways of building it, so let's have a look at the deck list and the other options from the sideboard. So Blue-White Control, this is such a popular deck at the moment, and there are a few different ways of building it. Most of the kind of core cards are going to be constant no matter which way you choose to build it, but there are a couple of different themes that you can fit in within the deck list that make the decks play a little bit differently. So the three that I've seen online are a standard Blue-White Control. So that's just like a kind of a typical draw go, play a sweep, play a finisher, and go for the win. You've got Approach, which is more or less the creatureless version of Blue-White Control. And then you've got Historic as well, Blue-White Historic, which has got slightly more creatures, a couple more artifacts and stuff on the main board. But they all kind of play the same way. This particular build of Blue-White Control is the standard kind of draw go, sweep, play a finisher variation. So we're playing, from the top, we've got 4 creatures in the deck. It's Torrential Gearhulk. This guy he's been a key part of any blue-based control deck, really, since he arrived in Kaladesh a couple of years ago. This guy is such a great card. You get instant value from this guy. He flashes into play. He's 5/6. He's gigantic. He'll stomp right over the top of a defending Lyra Dawnbringer. He's a big guy, quite difficult to deal with unless they're playing red. A Braid, of course, matches up quite well against this card, but generally speaking, this guy will round out games for you. You get value off him straight away. No reason not to play 4 copies in this deck too. We're playing 3 copies of Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. My mans, this is Teferi. You've seen probably a couple of my videos where I talk a lot about this guy. This guy is the business. He's a 5-mana planeswalker. He can draw you a card, untap a couple of lands for you. He can put a non-land permanent into its owner's library through from the top, and if you happen to get his ultimate off, which doesn't happen very often in Standard, he puts the opponent on a definite clock. There are a few ways of drawing cards in this deck, and yeah, you'll finish them off really quickly. Really, really valuable planeswalker, can protect himself the turn he comes down, can click up to 5 loyalty if you've got a relatively clear board in front of you. Drawing cards every turn is always good, so some really good value out of Teferi here. Such a good card. As I've said before, he's my favourite card out of Dominaria. Such a cool dude, and yeah, just a great card. A typical fit for this deck as well. So the enchantments, well, there's a few key cards here. We've got Search for Azcounter, which of course flips into Azcounter, the Sink and Ruin. This is some great early game filtering, late game searching for answers, searching for non-creature, non-land cards, which is just about everything in the deck, bar Torrential Gearhulk. Yeah, really valuable card. The filtering can't be overlooked if you're potentially running short on land. Yeah, that little bit of filtering that you get from Search for Azcounter is a good way of making sure you are going to be hitting your land drops for this deck. Also playing 4 copies of Seal Away and 4 copies of Cast Out. Seal Away is a huge role player in this deck. In fact, every white deck in the Dominaria Standard is going to be playing this card. This is a great card for 2 mana. Flashes in, instant speed, and you get to exile a tapped creature an opponent controls until it leaves the battlefield. Cast Out, similar kind of principle. It flashes in. This can deal with any permanent. It also happens to cycle too. If you are running, say, a little bit short on land, or just wanting to get extra card, there's no, if you're going to get more value out of an extra card rather than removing a permanent, if there isn't anything to remove, yeah, again, very good value out of these cards. So our instants and sorceries, well, there's a few ways of dealing with creatures here, and a few ways of controlling your opponent's spells too. We've got some counter spells in there. We've got some ways of bouncing things. So from the left, we've got Blink of an Eye, Disallow, a copy of Supreme Will, and Hieroglyphic Illumination. There could be an argument made for a couple of copies of Glimmer of Genius rather than the single copy of Supreme Will, dropping down to 3 copies of Hieroglyphic. I've seen a few deck lists that have kind of mixed and matched Glimmer of Genius in with Hieroglyphic Illumination. I think this is working for the way that I played the deck, particularly against the sort of meta that I'm involved in at the moment. Blink of an Eye is an interesting card. I'm not completely sold on it. I think potentially Essence Scatter would be a better fit in main deck, especially if you happen to be playing in a quite creature heavy meta. Disallow, always valuable. This with a Torrential Gearhulk, it's crazy answers to just about anything your opponent can do. We've got 4 copies of one of the big winners in the last couple of weeks, Settle the Wreckage. The price on this thing's gone through the roof. It's understandable. It was always had insane value as a card. Yes, your opponent gets to get some basic lands out of the exchange, but being able to decimate their entire army for the sake of them getting a few extra mana is well worth it. Fumigate, similar sort of role with Settle the Wreckage. A little bit slower. You do get some life off it too, which helps you stabilize. And then we're playing a single copy of Commit to Memory. So Commit, again, it's a counter spell. You can put something back into your opponent's library. And then Memory will help you reset. If you ever need to do that, you've got that option there. So we're playing 25 lands for this deck, starting with 2 copies of Field of Ruin. This is a great way of dealing with opposing non-basic lands. You'll also get a basic land out of the exchange. And a single copy of Memorial to Genius. So early game, yeah, you get a blue mana out of it. Late game, draw 2 cards. Pretty good. We've got our mana fixing in the way of 4 copies each of Glacial Fortress and the Cycling Irrigated Farmland, and 2 copies of Meandering River too. I'm pretty wary of not including too many lands that can potentially enter the battlefield tapped. I think 2 Meandering River is about the most that you want to play of that particular land. And we round the mana base out with 7 islands and 5 plains. So for the sideboard, there's some pretty typical blue-white stuff in here. I've talked before about Essence Scatter potentially going into the main deck, and there's definitely a strong argument for including it in there instead of Blink of an Eye. It really does depend on your meta. I think including 3 in the sideboard gives you that utility out of the board. If you happen to be playing in a not too much of a creature heavy meta. Negate, same sort of principle. If you're facing a lot of control decks, Negate has got same sort of value that Essence Scatter will bring to the main deck. Getting into the Trials is a great finisher versus control. He's also a pretty decent card versus mid-range too, being able to lock down a potential big threat. And just randomly stop you from losing the game too with his -0 emblem is good. This card's seen a lot of play. I've noticed in Modern too. The price has gone up quite a bit, and with good reason. It is a decent card. It was often overlooked, but always a decent card in this kind of a build of deck, this kind of blue-white control. We've got 3 copies of another money card, Lyra Dawnbringer. She's a great stabilizing creature against mid-range. She'll come in off the board. She's a huge body. First strike she flies, she lifelinks. Now there's a massive 10-point swing every turn if she hits your opponent. Very, very valuable, and cheap enough that you can protect her. Once you play her too, you can play her on turn 7 or 8 if the game's going quite long, and have mana up to protect her too. We're playing Approach of the Second Sun as well. 3 copies out of the sideboard. Now this is something that you wouldn't normally see in a sideboard, but I've included it here because a lot of decks aren't geared for dealing with Approach of the Second Sun. Where it used to be the prominent blue-white control build, it's not anymore. And that means 2 things. It means that people generally aren't preparing for it, and they especially aren't preparing for it game 2 and 3. So it's one of those cards that you can sneak in, kind of transform your main deck by taking out maybe 3 copies of Torrential Gearhulk, siding in these, and playing a different style of win. It's a great card. This is an another card that's kind of overlooked. It shouldn't be. It's got crazy potential to win you the game. And if you happen to have 2 copies in hand when you cast the first one, then you've got 1 turn clock for your opponent to try and do something about it. Also playing a single copy of Nezahal Primal Tide out of the board. This comes in against control too. It's got some value against some sort of spell heavy mid-range decks as well. He's a big body, he can protect himself, he can draw you some cards too. So pretty valuable on the whole. So this blue-white control deck, as I've mentioned before, plays a lot like a standard control deck will. You want to control the threats that your opponents are playing. You want to sweep away their creatures or maintain some control over their creatures on the board, and then play your big finishes in the form of Torrential Gearhulk main deck or Approach of the Second Sun and Lyra out of the sideboard, and then just work your way to a victory that way. Control decks almost always follow the formula of controlling, stabilizing, playing a finisher, and winning. And this deck does this quite well. There's lots of efficient ways of dealing with lots of creatures. Single threats can be dealt with quite comfortably through Seal Away, through Cast Out and Blink of an Eye. Multiple threats, you're going to deal with them with Settle the Wreckage and Fumigate. It's not very easy to play around this kind of deck once it gets rolling. If it hits all its land drops, which this deck does pretty regularly, you're very, very hard to go up against this deck without some way of dealing with those opposing counter spells and creature removal spells. Torrential Gearhulk is a fantastic finisher again in this format. If they're not playing maybe red or black, very hard to deal with this card, and you get value out of him straight away. And Teferi also sort of forms a finisher for you too, in the way that if you are playing the control matchup, there's a potential there for his ultimate to go off if they don't have any cards to deal with him. He can round out games for you too. This is a great pick for the current meta. If we're thinking May 2018, this is a very good pick for a strong deck in this meta. There are some expensive pieces in this deck, but ultimately it's a good choice. I think that the cards that will lose come rotation will be quite easily replaced with other cards that are going to come out in the next couple of sets. There's nothing that's really essential to the deck that's rotating. We still keep Cast Out. We keep all our pieces from Dominaria. We've still got Settle the Wreckage. There's some still a good base core to kind of stick with. So you can look at this deck as sort of a mid to long-term investment if you're wanting to get into standard and play a control deck. This is a very good option for that. Thanks again for tuning into this video, guys. This is the current deck that I'm playing for standard at my local game store. Such a fun build. Lots of cool cards in here. Appreciate any feedback you guys have on the video or on the deck list. Like I said, there's a few different ways of building it, so feel free to experiment with different cards to cater to your meta. A lot of people, when they net deck, don't tend to consider their own meta. They just think, look, if I just copy a deck online, it's just going to work. And that's somewhat true, but you've always got to consider your environment. Your local environment is really going to dictate some of those, the sort of top 5% of the deck in terms of some of your choices. And, that's where some room for experimentation and different cards can really shine depending on your meta. So have fun with the list, guys. Let me know what you think of it. I've included a deck list in the description too, so please check it out. Feedback's appreciated too. We'll catch you on the next video really soon, guys. Thanks a lot.